Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Charles Sabansi, and welcome you guys to another episode of the DREAMERSPRO show. We cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And today we got a pretty interesting show for you guys. Before we get into it, please make sure you like the video and sub to the channel, and also be sure to check out the DREAMERSPRO podcast that we have pinned in the comments section below. Let me get into this topic. Gilbert Arenas from time to time kind of does shows about us, making fun of us, or whatever it is. When Gilbert Arenas initially came into the NBA space, he used to have some pretty crazy takes. Pretty wacky takes. He knows this. I've said this to him before. He knows. And it seems like I wasn't the only one noticing. Other people like Rob Parker and Chris Broussard, who we're talking about today, also said that. Like, Gilbert Arenas has had some pretty wacky takes, especially about players from the 80s and the 90s, right? Why? I don't know. Why? I think he's probably just trying to cater to some of these young guys here today. And he's done shows. He's probably going to do one today. Maybe somebody will send it to him like, yo, son, Gil, you heard DREAMERSPRO over there. You know, you do it, blah, 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 go back at him. So that was that. So what happened? Yesterday, I was watching a segment from Gil's Arena, and it's called Gil's Arena Erupts Debating the Laziness of NBA Defense. And first of all, let me just say, this was an extremely entertaining segment. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you go and watch it. I had a ball. I had a blast watching it. It was very entertaining, and it really made you think, because Broussard McCamp had obviously an opposing view to Gilbert Arenas, and I actually read a lot of articles and stuff, some NBA things, some basketball things, not NBA things, some basketball things in terms of schemes and all of that, which was basically prompted by the show that I watched, on the segment that I watched from Gil's Arena. So it was a hell of an episode talking basketball. However, what happened? During that segment, they were there essentially arguing, right? And they were arguing basically over, you know, today's defense, why it sucks. And then and Gilbert Arenas was essentially saying, no, today's defensive players are really good, and that's the reason why they can't defend. And they really had this big back and forth. So what we want to do is want to play a little bit of the conversation that they had to say, and I want you guys to listen to it carefully and listen to the arguments that they were making, because it's going to be pertinent as we move forward in today's show. So take a listen to some of the things that they had to say on today's show.
The game is different. What I mean is the game is different. There's no more liabilities on the court.
But Gil, ain't nobody guarding nobody.
How hard was it to guard?
That's obvious.
No, how
That's
hard?
Obvious.
How hard was it to guard your team with all those stars on it?
That was hard as hell.
Okay, so nobody's sitting they couldn't sit in the lane and do all this stuff. Hello, you're gonna leave me and you're gonna leave me and leave Coop over?
Wait.
Every game wasn't a blowout.
There are a lot of teams out there like we had.
No, there's not a lot of teams that had like superstars, right, on one team. But now you have guys who can spread the floor. So when I decide to drive, I have a specialist now. I actually have a specialist that he's only in the game to shoot threes. So when I drive, like,
yeah.
Oh, okay, there we go. There's no more dead weight. There's guys.
But if you know he's a specialist and he's in the game to shoot, don't help off of it.
Right. We force him to pass it to the guy that's not the specialist.
Here we go. Don't help off of him. So when I drive now and you say no one's playing defense, yeah, because no one can take. There's no more taking the charges. There's no more of that because there's specialists out there now. So the floor is wide open. So when you got your one-on-one guys coming through the lane, there's no one there to help.
But there's been specialists before. In the history of the game, there's always been a shooter on the floor. Special.
You said it. A shooter.
Or two. Or three.
Okay. Jordan, right? Jordan had
Paxson.
Right. So now, okay. So let's give Jordan.
Kerr.
Let's give Jordan Paxson, Steve Kerr. Who else?
BJ.
Greg Hodges.
BJ
Armstrong. So now you got Michael Jordan, Paxson, Kerr, BJ Armstrong, and Craig, and Kukoc at the 5. When Jordan decides to drive, who the hell is there? How much does Jordan average now? When you're sitting there with a whole bunch of three-point shooters, there's nobody in the lane anymore. There's no Dennis Rodman man sitting there. There's no Pippins man sitting there. There's no Luke Longley's guys sitting in the
Jordan, no.
And we're talking about the triangle offense.
How much
That's a different offense.
What I'm saying is, how much does he average now when he's going one-on-one?
Oh, gosh.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's the game now. The game now has the...
It's not, because you're talking about one guy who can do that, who can increase his scoring by allowing the game to open up because he was such a dynamic scorer. Joker is not Michael Jordan. And if we were to take away Michael Porter Jr. and KCP and say, all right, we're going to make these other guys beat us.
So you heard the arguments that they were having back and forth, but Gilbert Arenas was essentially saying that it's hard to play defense because they're basically shooters all over the floor. That's what they were doing. That's what he was saying. And Broussard McCann was essentially saying the reason things are like this today is because players are essentially very, very lazy at playing defense. So that's pretty much the heart of the argument. You can go back and watch it and see. You can go back and watch the full thing to see what they were saying. And then I started thinking this morning. And then unfortunately I couldn't find all of the specific clips. But I was thinking about Chris Broussard this morning and some comments that he made after the Brooklyn Nets faced the Boston Celtics in the playoffs back in 2001 and 2022. And I remember that series vividly because I remember going into that series, the Brooklyn Nets had a Kevin Durant and a Kyrie Irving who are dynamic scorers. Some people are saying Kyrie Irving is the most skilled player in NBA history. I disagree. I think it's Kobe. But these are two dynamic scorers, efficient scorers. And they went into that playoff series and they were totally stifled by the Boston Celtics defense, who had the #1 rated defense in the NBA that year, giving up 106 points per game under the leadership of Ime Udoka. And they totally stifled them. And Chris Broussard came on TV the following day and brought up a point that I had not considered, and we did a show about it. Did very well. Had like 200,000 views. And he brought up a point that a lot of us didn't pay attention to. Now, why are we playing it here today? The reason we're playing it here today, because I believe the points that Chris Broussard brings up in this soundbite directly debunks a lot of the arguments that Gilbert Arenas tried to put forward in his recent sit down that he had on Gil's Arena. So what we want to do is want to play exactly what Chris Broussard had to say here in reaction to what he saw in that series. And then we're going to come back and really get into this show. Take a listen to what he had to say here.
Kyrie Irving is an excellent offensive player that has been wildly overrated by segments of the media and segments of the player population because he is so almost hypnotizing with his skill. It should not be a shock to anyone that Kyrie Irving followed a great game with a bad game. He has done that throughout this season. The Durant thing is jarring in a way I have been saying for the last 2 months, those 40 minutes a game might be wearing him down. That's the only possible explanation.
No.
Brew, you're shaking your head. I know you're saying it shouldn't happen.
There's another explanation.
There's another explanation.
First of all, he was out
for
the thing. 20-something games straight.
I understand that, but just quickly, if I may. In this series, he has 13 made baskets and 12 turnovers. The way he is having the ball taken from him is more jarring than the missed jump shots or even seeing his jump shot get blocked. He is not, and he seemed so quietly confident going into this series in the press conferences. To see Kevin Durant on the court getting bullied, getting pushed around, not being able to do anything it is not the same stakes and it is not that level of meltdown. But it is nearly as jarring as, to me, LeBron in 11, where it was like, wait, what is happening here? I've never seen this guy play like this. No.
Here's the difference.
I'm just saying as far as how different it looks from how I expected him to play. That's all I'm saying. It just doesn't look like Kevin Durant.
I agree with that, but LeBron took himself out of the series in 2011. They didn't stop him. He stopped himself.
Yep.
Kevin, let's give the Celtics some credit. And I'm going to say, Nick, because we always hear, I even heard Gilbert Arenas recently on a podcast talking about Rodman, Jordan, Pippen. They couldn't guard Kevin Durant. This is 90s basketball. The refs are letting the Celtics play 90s defense. And they're getting physical with Kevin Durant, and he's not used to it. He's used to having room, being able to do what he wants. They are getting physical with him, and that's the problem. Simple as that. We know he's not incredibly strong. He's not big. He's not a physical player. They are letting the Celtics be physical, and it's thrown Durant off his game.
So you heard what he had to say. Fantastic. Now let me get into this this thing. Now we can really get into it. Chris Broussard spoke about the fact that they were able to play 90s defense, right? And that's the reason why Kevin Durant and those guys were stifled. Let me just get into some of the statistics. And Gilbert Arenas, we're not getting this from Google. We're getting this from Basketball Reference and NBA.com. The reason I brought that up is because Gil would be trying to say that I only use Google. I don't know what he uses. Maybe Gilbert Arenas be using Bing or something like that. I don't know where he gets his information. So what happened? That Boston Celtics team that season had a 51-31 record, right? Their defensive rating was they were the second highest rated the defensive rated team in the NBA, giving up 106.9 points per game. That season, the Brooklyn Nets defensive rating was 19th, and they were scoring 113.6 points per game on offense that season. Let's look at the regular season numbers of one Kyrie Irving that year and one Kevin Durant, and then we get into their playoff numbers. That year, Kyrie Irving for the Brooklyn Nets was scoring 27 points per game. Get this. 27.4 points per game that season. He was shooting 46.9% from the field. He was shooting 41.8% from the three and 91.5% from the free throw line. Kevin Durant that season for the Brooklyn Nets was scoring 29.9 points per game, let's say 30, on 52% shooting from the field, 38.3% shooting from the three-point line, and 91% shooting from the free throw line. So what happens when the Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, all of these guys were actually able to play physical, tough, smothering 90s defense where they're not going to be calling ticky-tack fouls? Are you aware that year in the playoffs, Kyrie Irving, I just gave you his numbers, went from 27.5 to 21 points per game, shooting 44% from the field, 38% from the three, and 100% from the free throw line in 4 games. Kevin Durant that year was scoring in the playoffs 26.6. You're like, 3, that's great. On 38.6% shooting from the field, 33% shooting from the three-point line, and 89% shooting from the free throw line. Now, what you don't realize is if you watch the games, you would realize what exactly was taking place during those games. What was actually taking place was that Kevin Durant was actually being stifled in that game, in that series. He was actually being stifled. I believe in game 1, Kevin Durant shot field goal percentage. He shot 40% in game 1. Kyrie Irving shot 55% in game 1. Game 2 of that series, Kevin Durant, what did he shoot from the field? Kevin Durant shot, let me see. He shot, what did he shot? He shot 66%. Game 3, I think it got even worse. Game 3, Boston won that game. KD shot 54%. Kyrie shot 35%. They were being outclassed. Now, one thing I want to bring up here, Gilbert Arenas in his argument is basically saying that, listen, the reason it is extremely difficult to guard players here today is because of the composition of NBA teams. They are comprised of so many great shooters. So it's going to create a lot of space, right? You have all of these great shooters on the team. So who are you going to guard? Whose man are you coming up? All of those different things, right? So you're basically stuck to playing man-to-man, and then you're switching everything. And Rashard McCants is saying there's lazy defense and all of that. But Gilbert Arenas was essentially attributing everything that we're seeing right now to three-point shooting percentage. However, there's a problem. There's a very big problem with that argument. Why is there a problem with that argument that Gilbert Arenas was making? Because if we go back and look at that Nets roster in the 2021-2022 season, do you know that Nets roster, if we adjust for three-point shooting percentage, let me get it here. Kyrie shot. Hold on, let me get it right. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players shooting at least 40%. You had, let me get it right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players on that Nets roster shooting at least 38%. The Nets had a lot of great shooters. The Nets had Kyrie Irving, who was a 42% three-point shooter that season in the regular season. You had Kevin Durant, who was a 38%. James Harden didn't play that year, so he didn't play. Joe Harris was a 46.6% three-point shooter. You had Seth Curry, who was a 46.8% shooter. You had Patty Mills, who was a 40% shooter. You had Bruce Brown, who was shooting 40% from the field. So, Mr. Gilbert Arenas, why didn't it work out then? The reason it didn't work out then, I think, goes back to Chris Broussard's argument, which was they were allowed to play actual defense and touch guys. Kevin Durant, if you know anything about Kevin Durant, the thing that bothers him the most is physicality. If you get into him, you crowd his space, you body him up. That's how Ron Artest guarded him when they were playing in the playoffs. Ron Artest always had a body on him. He was a bigger, stronger guy. Not bigger, but stronger guy, although KD had a height advantage on him, so he was always leaning his weight on him, trying to fatigue him out. KD doesn't play well with a lot of physicality. He doesn't. Very few players can actually play well with a lot of physicality and still score the bucket. Kobe is one of them. Giannis is one of them. Shaq is another one. Allen Iverson is another one. Those dudes are totally different breeds. So Gil's argument of the way teams are comprised, it didn't work there. When you're actually allowed to play physical defense. And I just listed the amount of spacing, the guys shooters on the floor, and it didn't really make a difference now, did it? Because the Brooklyn Nets team was absolutely stifled in that series. And it actually didn't even matter. So I'm with Chris. I'm with Broussard. Gil tried, and I think Gil failed. These are my thoughts. What I want to know from you guys, what do you think about today's show? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. We catch you on the next show. Peace.